Well, I have with me now Joy John, who is a global political analyst from Bellcrest Institute in Washington, D.C. We'll be looking at the part where Zelensky says no, and the EU is now throwing its weight behind him ahead of the meeting between Trump and Putin. Good to have you this weekend, Joy. How significant is this meeting between Putin and Trump? The two leaders haven't met in a while, and the last couple, of months, nothing has been done, and it seems like that relationship has gone sour. So what do we expect, and how significant is this meeting?
It's highly significant, and just like you rightly pointed out, the two leaders have not met since 2019, and recent months have been marked with tension. I consider it significant because the last meeting between Washington and Moscow was back in the Reagan and Gorbachev era, dating back to 1987 at the Washington summit. And at that summit, it was all about talks on nuclear forces threat. This particular meeting offers a rare window, and I call it a window of peace, a window to reset the tone if the outcomes are uncertain. Historically, face-to-face dialogue between both nations has shaped the trajectory of conflicts, and both sides will be testing, how far the other is willing to go.
So,
It also signals, go ahead.
right. So what do you make of this suggestion on swapping of territory, and what territory is, Trump referencing here? The last we checked, we don't know that, Ukraine is occupying a Russian territory.
Yes, it, it it raises more questions than answers here, even though no official map has been outlined as where they want to carve out. I think the discussion tends to border around eastern Ukraine and which is already under Russian control since 2014. Now, that makes it very complex because Donbass is part of that map there. So any trade of land would directly challenge that principle of sovereignty, which, Ukraine and its allies are very skeptical about at this time.
Now, so this meeting with Trump, some see it as a Putin's win because, according to critics, Putin is being rewarded for doing absolutely nothing.
So that, yes, there is that perception, but for some, I think securing a meeting with a U.S. president is a symbolic gain for Putin. It's a big win for him, especially without him making any concessions in this case with Ukraine. However, the value of such optics depends on what follows. And why do I say that? If the talks lead to sustainable pressure or clear conditions outlined here, the narrative could shift from rewarding inaction to holding Russia accountable, which is what most of the diplomatic community wants to see happen at this time. If the U.S. uses it to tighten conditions for any future engagement, then it's a win for Washington and a big win for them.
Now, if he doesn't secure the win, let's just, assume here, if that is not the case, what should the world expect?
Well, I did mention that it's a very complex issue. If he doesn't secure the win, it's back to the drawing board. It's called off. But with Trump, you have to take him as you see him. What you see today cannot be used for him tomorrow. So it's going to be very, I think, premature at this point to say if it doesn't happen. So we'll just wait and see how it folds out next week when they meet on Friday.
But, we've had conversations with a lot of analysts who refer to this situation going on as, the Trump game. But then isn't it obvious that Putin is just buying more time? Putin hasn't given up anything. Like you said, no concessions. Seems like we're just riding along. And a lot of people, honestly, Joy, are pessimistic about the outcome of that meeting.
And I think it's a fair observation. I think it's I cannot answer that I agree or do not agree, but I know that Putin has been known to have a long history of using negotiations to ease pressure and regroup military. And by prolonging these talks without any meaningful concessions, what he can do is maintain control of that occupied territory. So he still has a grip over the territory in question, but then isn't, prolonging the talk. So that's a unique attribute that Putin is known for. And in this context, it's the unity and patience of Ukraine allies that we're looking at, because the pattern has been visible throughout this conflict. It's been, like a game of chess.
Right. So, what's your assessment of Zelensky's absence from the planned meeting? The EU has backed Zelensky, saying no peace talks should happen without Ukraine. I mean, it's like someone is negotiating over something that literally you are the centerpiece of that conversation. How does that feel? I mean,
So I think it's important we understand that Zelensky's absence reflects a conscious decision by Ukraine and underscores its firm insistence of being central to any peace process on the table. It also sends a clear signal here that Ukraine refuses to be sidelined and will not accept agreements made behind its back. Okay, like just sitting like a puppy and waiting for a candy from the owner. The stance is very clear there. I think that it's essential that Ukraine be at that table that directly affects its territory and its future. It's a sovereign country. We are also seeing growing support from the European Union, and that reinforces the fundamental principle of diplomacy here. So if negotiations must include the stage of negotiations should include all parties affected by this. Now, if this stalls, we are back to the drawing board. And I don't think that Ukraine is willing to give up their territorial integrity.
I mean, Zelensky has said that time and time again, they're not conceding any of those territories. Now, the EU is said to have sort of lost significance in these negotiations. And one's wondering why is that? Because, I mean, you hear oftentimes, I mean, time and time again this year, I've talked about, getting a budget to help Ukraine in its defense and all. Is the EU as relevant as, I mean, in these talks?
So there are multiple factors at play. It's a very complex situation. And I say that because in major international conflicts here, the European Union's influence has faced challenges, partly because major powers like the US and Russia, considering their geopolitical weight, tend to dominate the agenda setting in such conflicts here. We also have internal divisions. We all agree that a divided house cannot stand, and that we see where the UN is faced with competing priorities for them. For instance, it has to cope with balancing economic ties with Russia against political and security concerns. That's one. And for one, I think the European Union, despite its influence, has less direct control over these discussions, and they have to navigate or tread carefully within the framework. The powers that US and Russia establish. That's just where it is. It's in a very tight situation here.
And then I will just take you up on, the issue of sanctions. Remember, just a couple of days ago, we're talking about Trump and the sanctions put together by Lindsey Graham and how very effective the sanctions would be and how, of a threat it is to Russia. And then 8th of August, just slided by and nothing happened. A lot of people say critics, of course, and analysts, it's like Trump is the one who's being played here.
Well, it may be too soon to conclude that. I also recall saying that this is with Trump. You take him as you see it. He's dealing with Russia. They enjoyed a great relationship in his first term. It's been different in Trump 2.0. So it's going to be very, I'll say, also premature to say that Trump is the weak one on this end, and predict what he's going to do next, because Trump is unpredictable.
Right. And then finally, Zelensky is at the middle or the receiving end of these talks. What can he do if the negotiations do not go the way he pleases?
It's a very critical moment for any leader, and in this sense, the government of Ukraine here has a lot to work on. Zelensky faces a difficult balancing act. At this time, it's important that he asserts Ukraine's sovereignty firmly, while tactfully navigating the waters in the powerful international factors. If the talks between Trump and Putin don't meet expectations, Zelensky can leverage continued diplomatic engagement, which he has, continue to rally international support, as has always done, and of course, stand 10 toes on ground with his military, making sure that his military is strong. Ultimately, I think that Ukraine's resilience and the unity that its allies are bringing up to, are bringing in, will help shape any sustainable outcome from this war with Russia.
All right. Thank you so much, Joy John, for joining us from Washington, D.C. We look forward to that, what's going to come in the coming days.